Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business. Joining me today is Annie Dormuth, who is the Alberta Director of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for joining us today, Annie.
Always great to be on the show.
All right, well, Premier Jason Kenney yesterday or last night in a speech to the nation, so to speak, laid out the plan ahead for the next 3 weeks for Alberta and businesses in particular in COVID restrictions. Just maybe let's start, Annie, by just your general and overall thoughts on what the Premier announced last night.
Well, definitely yesterday's news it comes to a disappointment to a lot of small businesses who are barely hanging on. Once again, for a third time, we're seeing the complete closure of in-person services for the fitness, hospitality, and now personal services as well. So definitely this is going to heavily impact businesses when really they are just hanging on by a very, very small thread and are really just, facing an immense amount of uncertainty about their future of their business. So it just, it does layer on to the stress that small business owners are already feeling right now.
Yeah, and we're looking at another 3 weeks, right? At least. And
At least 3 weeks, yes.
That's the key phrase, right? At least, all right. What I wanted to ask you is about restaurants, all right? So restaurants, have been one of the hardest hit industries out there. A lot of them got ready to maybe generate some cash and revenue by creating and spending money and creating patios, etc. That they were told that they were going to be fine to do, and then boom, that swept right under them as well, right?
Yeah, and I think that was what was missing from today's announcement and even today's press conference. Other provinces, for example, the province of BC right next to us, actually layered on an additional grant support program to businesses hit by this third wave. So on top of what I would call the equivalent of maybe our SME relaunch grant, they have what they call a circuit breaker grant as well. Again, grant support directly for businesses being forced to close again. And I think that that's really what needs to happen in Alberta here. We do appreciate and recognize the Alberta government has done well to support small businesses in the form of providing up to $30,000 through its SME relaunch grant. But considering the state of these businesses being forced to close completely again for a third time, we really do call on the Alberta government to provide an additional grant support directly for those industries in the form of, up to $20,000 to help recoup the costs, as you mentioned, of maybe getting their patio set up and ready for a spring season here that has now since been delayed.
Yeah. So I want to elaborate a little bit more on the costs involved. When you're opening and shutting a business, shutting down a business, does that add to your costs? I'm thinking it's, even like the restaurants, right? Obviously, they're opening up, they buy all this product, etc. But then they got to do something with it, right? And it probably goes to waste, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's so, some people may not understand the back end of a small business operations, but anytime we go through these kind of yo-yo effects, it means basically laying off their entire staff again. It means also perhaps recalling them again, and maybe even down the road not being able to be in a position to recall all of them again and be forced to a position of a complete layoff or, unfortunately having to let those employees go. So it does add to the stress of a small business owner, and of course they are going to see some revenue losses. We're in a pretty dire situation already in Alberta when only a quarter of small businesses are making normal sales for this time of year, and that number has been fairly consistent for more than a year now throughout the entire duration of the pandemic. So of course it is definitely going to impact them, and again, it's just they're barely hanging on, especially those in the fitness and restaurant industries. CFIB is going to be releasing a report tomorrow that kind of shows a comparative analysis of provincial grant support programs. And in there, you're going to see a very, very worrisome number. And that is, according to CFIB's data, it shows that the average dine-in restaurant in Alberta has accumulated $330,000 worth of COVID-19 related debt. That
Oh,
is an
my,
astronomical number.
that's
It
incredible.
is far, far higher than the Alberta average, and even far higher than a comparative business, say, for example, in Ontario.
Yeah,
And, as we get to these businesses to be able to reopen, and, it may take some time for them to make revenues again. I don't think it's going to be as simple as turning on a switch here.
sure.
If we're going to have even a staggered reopening plan, additional support is going to be needed for these businesses in the foreseeable future. And, businesses are not feeling optimistic right now. I gotta say, 27% are not optimistic about the future of their business. And I think a little over half, or 60% of Alberta businesses, aren't even optimistic that the pandemic will end before 2022. So as long as we have these restrictions in place, it's imperative that the provincial government kind of steps up here, recognize that debt load for a restaurant business owner, and provide additional grant support to them.
Yeah, the other thing I want to talk to you a little bit about, and you kind of mentioned, is the employment situation, right? Let's give an example, say, of a restaurant, right? You hire some staff back on, because you've got the patios going. Now you got to lay them off again, or because obviously, you don't need anybody in the restaurant outside of the cooks and the front desk area, so to speak, right? And for deliveries and pickup. Is there a danger here that whenever this thing is done, whenever, it's going to be tough for certain industries to get people because people have moved on, right? People are just saying, I'm a server, and this is third time now that I've been shut down and lost my job, so to speak. I'm out of this. This kind of reminds me of the oil patch, right? Of the ups and downs of the oil patch, and how many times over the years I've heard people say, that's it, I'm done with the uncertainty of the oil patch, and I'm going to get a quote unquote steady job. So is there a danger going forward that some of these industries, some of these sectors, retail, restaurants, are going to have a tough time finding people?
Well, and that's exactly the case. I think we await for further details of the federal government's hiring incentive program that they announced in the budget. That is a program that the CFIB supports, in the sense of trying to reconnect employers back with their employees when they're in a position to do so. Obviously going to be a concern going forward. The CFIB, when we released our business closure report, that estimated 22% of small businesses were at risk of closing, we did provide an estimate on, the impact that would have on private sector jobs. And again, it is quite severe, considering that private sector businesses and small businesses make up the far strongest majority of basically the employers in Alberta. So definitely going to be a concern going forward. Like I said, I think that that's where governments need to become creative in ensuring that employers can again regain that connection to their employees, either through the federal program or even through a provincial owned program as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us again today, Annie.
Of course, anytime, Mario.
Okay, super. That was Annie Dormuth, who is Alberta Director of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business. Thanks for joining us today.